I do know how to hit record, and we're recording. We're going to do Acts chapter 18. Wow! That's my Kermit the Frog impersonation. We are going to do Acts chapter 18, continuing the story of Paul going all over the place and preaching every place he goes to. Have you noticed that that's the only thing he does?
Yep.
He goes to town,
Preaches.
and he preaches. Well, guess what? He's going to do a different thing this time.
Whoa.
Don't worry, he's going to do a lot of preaching. But we're going to find out at least one other thing that Paul does. Now you're all super excited.
I bet I know.
All right. So, let's see. He preached about Jesus, who was going to judge the world, right? And how did people feel about this Jesus? He didn't say his name was Jesus, but we knew it was about Jesus because he talked about a man who rose from the dead, right? How did people react to that message? Oh, that's so silly. I might want to think about it. And, ooh, I like this. So that's the reaction.
This is cool. I want to hear more about it.
And the
The
result...
happy man looks like a monkey.
Oh, well, sometimes people do. All right, so that's what happened when he was in the city of Athens, and now we're going to continue with chapter 18. Let me get off my table. After these things, who's he?
Oh.
Paul. We're still talking about Paul. I just thought I'd mention that. He departed from Athens and came to Corinth, and he found a certain Jew named Aquila, and a man of Pontus by race, lately come from Italy with his wife, Priscilla, because Claudius had commanded that all the Jews to depart from Rome. Claudius was, I think, the Caesar at that time, and he kicked all the Jews out of the city of Rome. And he came unto them. Who's the he? Paul. Right, because there's a lot of people mentioned here. Paul came to them. Who's the them?
The people who have been kicked out of Rome.
Yep, Aquila and Priscilla. Aquila and Priscilla. He came into them, and because he was of the same trade, he abode or lived with them, and they worked. For by their trade they were tent makers. So Paul is a preacher of the gospel, but what was his trade? What was he trained in to be a worker for?
Making tents.
Making tents.
God.
That's cool.
Man, so Paul can do two things. All right, so now we have to draw Paul. He's really looking, he's squinting because he's got his fingers holding the tent cloth. Here's his other finger holding a needle. I'm going to make it like a massive needle with the thread so that you can actually see it. And here's the tent cloth, and Paul is just working up a storm making tents. All right, so there's the tent cloth. Okay. I don't know why he's got such a bulbous head this time. There's his ear. And then here's Aquila. He's happy. He's got a friend working with him. And here's Priscilla. She's happy. She has a friend working with her. And she has earrings and hair. And there they are. They're standing and holding hands. All right, so there they are, and they're all working together, and they're making tents. That's the tent cloth. That's what that's supposed to be. Okay, and see Aquila, he's holding a tent pole. There we go. That's a tent pole that he's working on. All right, so he's living in this other city called Corinth. We will do the maps in our next class, because in our next class, there's going to be a lot of travel. So we will talk about where Corinth is next time, okay? We're just going to talk about what's going on here. So he is living with them, making tents. Is that the only thing he's doing?
No.
Oh.
All right, we're going to read and we're going to find out. But everyone knows, wait a minute, it's Paul. What do you think he's busy doing? Right? He's going to be busy preaching. So here's my question. Why do you think he was busy making tents instead of busy preaching? That's something to think about. Wanted to serve and help them out?
He was
Maybe.
helping Christians.
He was helping Christians, right? So that's a good service. Yeah, these are good guesses.
Maybe they were friends and they needed help.
And he's staying with them. Maybe since they're giving him a place to stay, maybe they're feeding him breakfast, coffee and eggs, that I'll help you make some tents for an extra cup of coffee, that kind of thing. I don't know.
Maybe it's for worshiping in.
Okay, maybe they're going to make a tent to worship in. Could be. All right, well, let's see what happens next. And he reasoned in the synagogues every Sabbath. Does that sound like normal, Paul?
No.
That's it. That's what he always did. He's reasoning in the synagogues every Sabbath and persuaded Jews and Greeks. Okay, so then he's also doing his normal thing, right? So let's draw that on the backboard. Let's draw that because there's going to be a lot of talking in this one.
We should do a map.
So Paul,
Well, there's going to be a lot of maps next week.
here's Paul, and he's got his tongue, and he is just reasoning to them. He's got his preaching hand out. That's one of my favorite things to draw is the preaching hand. And he's got this posture of, hey, y'all, I'm a preacher. I don't know why he's doing a karate kick. Oh. And he's got this really beefy other arm. So there he is, Paul in his green shirt, and he is reasoning in the synagogue. I don't have a room above him to draw the roof of the synagogue, so I'm going to draw that he's standing on a mat called the synagogue, okay? Or a brick.
How could have
Synagogue. I need to get a new black. My black is wearing out. Can you guys see that all right? Well enough anyways? You can't
Yeah.
you
Synagogue.
barely understand the letters I drew. There we go. I'll draw that word again. Let's see if this is better. Synagogue. So there he is standing in the synagogue. Of course, I drew him on top of the word synagogue, but you get the idea. So that's where he is, and he's doing preaching in the synagogue. And what day of the week is he doing it? He's reasoning every Sabbath day, because that's when the Jews would get together in the synagogue. Do you think he would say, "Oh, guys, it's Friday. I'm not talking today"? Does that sound like Paul? No. But that would be the big day, the Saturday, the Sabbath day. That would be the day he could really do a lot of work. So I think that that's the idea. Okay? All right.
Even if he had too much work on Friday or Tuesday, he would still do it.
I think so. Okay. But when Silas and Timothy came down from Macedonia, wait, why weren't Silas and Timothy with Paul?
They wanted to stay in Crete.
Because
Remember-
Paul got kicked out, but they stayed behind.
Yes, and they stayed behind. Okay, now here's something. It's kind of hard to read it in this translation, and some of the newer translations make it a little bit different, but I'm going to show you this point. So Silas and Timothy come back down. Let's see, what did Silas looks like this. And what did we make Timothy look like? Oh man, Silas, you're
He had a
not.
long nose. That's all I remember.
Timothy has a long nose. Okay, Silas
I drew
doesn't have that
Timothy with
giant.
overalls.
He what?
I drew Timothy with overalls.
All right, I guess I'll draw Timothy in overalls too. I don't know why, but it'll work. Long nose Timothy, and got hair, and he's got overalls. Overalls are fun to draw.
How about the other one that has shoes on?
All right, so there is Timothy.
Maybe Silas could have shoes on and big spiky hair.
Okay, well that's enough. All right. So Silas, and we know it's Silas because there's an S, and we know it's Timothy because there's a T. All right. Silas and Timothy came down from Macedonia. Now look at this phrase. Paul was constrained. Okay, come on, get my pencil. Paul was constrained by the word. This is an interesting translation. Paul was constrained by the word, testifying to the Jews that Jesus was the Christ. Jack, can you give me your Bible real quick? Because I want to read that and show that here. Because the ESV does a different way of saying that. What is that? Verse 5. Let me get my little thingy here. When Silas and Timothy arrived from Macedonia, Paul was occupied with the word. So he was occupied with the word, constrained by the word or occupied by the word. So what was Paul doing a lot of before Silas and Timothy got there?
Preaching.
We know he was preaching, but what else did it say he was doing?
Making tents.
He was definitely making tents, right? And one of the questions we asked was, well, why? Why was he's usually so busy preaching? And there's a lot of guesses about maybe he was just being helpful. He was being helpful and being loving. But here's something that we find out from the other letters in the New Testament is that I think especially the Philippian church, they sent some money, and I think even Thessalonica, they sent some money down to Paul to help him. So it sounds like not only was Paul trying to preach, he was preaching, but he was also busy making tents, I guess maybe because he needed to make some money. But when Timothy and Silas came down, they had brought some money as a gift from the other churches. And now Paul was able to spend his time busy preaching the word. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And that's a guess. I think it's a good guess. So I'm going to say that's what I really think happens. I don't know if I can say that's 100% true, but I think that that's what's really happened. They come down and they make Paul feel better, and they give him the gift of money so that he can work. And so now what is he doing? He's constrained by the word. He's occupied by the word. He's extra busy with the word, testifying to the Jews that Jesus was the Christ. So now he can really, he's been preaching. Now he can really, really be busy preaching. Okay. Now what happens to Paul when he is in a town and then he gets really busy preaching? What always happens?
Someone comes
Gets kicked out.
He gets kicked out. Usually he gets kicked out because a lot of people are believing, right?
Yeah.
Did he get kicked out of Athens?
No, he
No.
decided to.
And it might be because there weren't a lot of believers and people didn't kick him out. Let's see what happens now in Corinth. And when they opposed themselves, opposition, and blasphemed, he shook out his raiment and said unto them, your blood be upon your own heads. I am clean. From henceforth, I will go unto the Gentiles. So he is teaching the Jews that Jesus is the Christ. But when the Jews opposed themselves and blasphemed, what does it mean that the Jewish people were doing to his preaching? They opposed the preaching and they blasphemed the preaching. Do you guys know what the word blaspheme means?
Pretend saying that you're God when you're not.
That's
Or
one
saying
of the
something is
ways.
God when it's not.
Blasphemy is speaking something that isn't just true, it's a very untrue thing about God. And so there's even a passage in the Bible, one of the Psalms, that says, the fool says in his heart, there is no God. Well, to say there's no God is a blasphemous thing to say because there is a God, right? And so they are saying Jesus is not the Christ, but if Jesus is the Christ, that's blasphemy. No, guys, you're wrong. Jesus is the Christ. That's blasphemy. So what did Paul do to them? He shook out his raiment and said to them, your blood be on your own heads. I am clean, and henceforth I will go to the Gentiles. What is Paul doing?
He's saying he doesn't want to preach to them anymore.
Right. What does it say he actually does with his clothes? I'm going to draw his hands on his clothes.
He shook off his raiment.
He shook off his raiment. It's like You hear the part? I don't know how you draw his own cloak and his. So I'm trying to make it look like he's shaking his clothes. And then you draw like the shaky lines, right? He's like doing this. What does it mean? Like, Paul, why are you shaking your clothes? Do you think they understood what it meant when he was doing it?
Hey, is this anything like shaking the foot dust, but this is shaking the shirt dust?
Yes, shaking the dust. All right, I don't know how to draw. Those are big dusts. There, that's how you draw dusts. He's shaking the dust. I think that's the idea here. And so you can, if you draw it, it's going to make it look like Paul was filthy, like his cloak was so covered with dust. But that's the idea, okay? So that's it. I'm done. You can see, I'm done with you. People will do this kind of thing. I'm done. That's what he's trying to say. I'm done with this. He's shaking the dust off of him. Your blood be on your own heads. What does that mean? We all have blood in our heads, right? If you don't have blood in your head, you're dead. So what does it mean your blood will be on your own head?
When you die, no one will care.
Kind of
When
that
they
idea.
die, all the blood from their death will go onto their head.
No, the idea is, have you ever heard of the idea of being blood guiltiness? Like if you're guilty, you're guilty, and blood sometimes refers to the guilt or the problem. Okay. Yes, you have blood in your body, but if you killed somebody, for instance, you'd be guilty of spilling their blood, people might say. Mm-hmm. And so if you are guilty of that crime of murder, the blood is on your head. What if you were walking along and you kind of leaned against the tree and you accidentally pushed down the tree fell down and then knocked down another tree and then knocked down another tree and then knocked down another tree, and 14 trees later it fell on somebody's head and they died.
That would be an accident.
Yeah, would you say you're guilty?
No.
No, it's like ooh, that was a terrible accident, right? Well, what Paul is saying to them is, Jesus is the Christ. Jesus is the Christ. And if you are opposing that, and if you blaspheme it, you are guilty. I've preached to you. I am clean. You are guilty. What he's trying to say is, I did the work of preaching. You need to do the work of listening. And now you need to take care of that. I'm going to go preach to the Gentiles. Does that make sense?
It reminds me some of when Jesus was about to be crucified, when Pontius Pilate washed his hands of the matter.
He washed his hands. I am not guilty of Jesus's death, is what he's trying to say. I don't know.
I don't have anything to do with it.
I don't know if that's going to help him much, but that's that same idea. This is, you are doing it. It's on you. I'm trying to tell you not to. And so that's what Paul is telling them. Now, do you think if one of them said later on, no, wait, Paul, I'd like to listen. Nope, you had your chance. Me. No, Paul will still talk to them. He's just trying to let them know, this is a big deal. You need to think about it. Okay? And I'm done talking to you. I'm going to talk to the Gentiles. So let's see how he does that. Okay, let's open up the screenshot.
What's the screenshot?
Screenshot is my weird word for sharing the screen with you. All right, here we go. So he departed thence. Departed from where?
Where he was.
He was in Corinth, right? But where was he preaching? He was standing in the synagogue. So he departed from there and went into the house of a certain man named Titus. So he went from the synagogue. I'm going to draw it just like a church, guys. I don't know what else to do, okay? We'll just do like a classic church building, right, with the cross on the top. Actually, that would make no sense because they don't believe in Jesus. They don't believe in Jesus. Okay, so instead of a cross on the top, they have the 10 Commandments on the top of their roof. Okay. All right. So he went from the synagogue, and then he went to where? Did he go to a church building?
No, we went
Nope.
to
There were no church buildings. He went to a house. So right next to it, I'll draw a house. And this is the house of whom?
a man named Titus.
A man named Titus. So I'll put the letter T on the top. Okay. And I just drew them next. Okay. So he went from the synagogue into the house of Titus, Justus, one that worshiped God, whose house joined hard to the synagogue. Oh my goodness. Do you know what that means? They were right next door. How far did Paul go? He went next door. Isn't that hilarious? I'm done talking to you. You don't want to hear me, so I am leaving. And he goes next door. What if the windows were open? What if the windows were open? Because they didn't have air conditioning. They would still hear his preaching. Isn't that funny? So now he's in Titus's house. Okay, I'll just write the word Titus, the name Titus. Titus, and over here is the synagogue. Right. So now I'm going to draw some of the Jewish people that were in the synagogue. Okay. Here's one of them. Here's another one. And here is another one there. And they have legs. Lucky for them. Certainly they don't have arms, but that's okay. So those are the guys in the synagogue, okay? Paul is right here. Are there people who are listening to Paul?
Yes.
Yeah, there were some people. These guys didn't want to listen to him, but if he's in Titus's house, who do you think is listening to him?
Titus.
Titus. So let's draw Titus. Titus has a gigantic nose and a big grin.
Whoa.
And he also has to stand in his own house. So he's got bendy legs so that he can fit into the house. There. Now he's in his own house. And he's holding on to Paul's foot so he doesn't fall out of his own house. All right, so there's Titus. Titus is a happy guy. Oh, I guess we can draw him blue because he's listening, right? All right. There we go. So there we go. That's pretty good. I just think it's kind of funny that he went, that's it. I'm done with you guys. I'm going to go all the way next door. They didn't want to hear it, but guess what? They might still have to hear some of it. Okay. He departed thence and went into a certain house of a man named Titus, Titus Justus, one that worshiped God, whose house joined hard to the synagogue. And Crispus, the ruler of the synagogue, believed in the Lord with all his house. And many of the Corinthians hearing believed and were baptized. Many of they hearing believed and were baptized. This is a pretty cool set of words here. This is an important verse. What did many people do? Hearing the words, they believed the words and were baptized. Because don't you think the words were about baptism?
Yes.
So they heard the words. So you can draw an ear. All right, and they believed. So here comes the word, and it's going into the ear. But what does it have to do after it goes inside the ear?
Go into the brain.
It has to go into the brain. But just because it goes into the brain doesn't mean you'll believe it, right?
Yes.
Not everyone who hears will believe. But then it went into the brain. We can draw a little arrow up to the brain. And then what did they do?
Got baptized.
Then they got baptized. Is that blue? That's violet. Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering if this Titus
You goes all the way through your head.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. If this Titus is the one with the New Testament letter, I don't know. I could ask about that. So there it is. They're hearing, and they're believing, and they're being baptized.
All the way through your head.
Yeah. In one ear and out the other. All right. And the Lord said unto Paul in a night by a vision, be not afraid, but speak. Hold not thy peace, for I am with you, and no man shall set on you to harm you, for I have much people in this city. Whoa. God said no one's going to harm you. What has happened in almost every town that Paul has gone to?
He's gotten harmed.
He's gotten harmed. He's been kicked out.
He
He's
got
been
stoned.
all these sorts of troubling things, right? What does God say is going to happen here?
He's not going to get harmed.
Yeah, because God said, I have many people here. And he wanted to make sure Paul was confident to stay there. And so God gave him, well, let's think about this. God gave him some faith, right? These words would give you faith. God gave him love. God gave him hope. God gave him help. I don't know how to draw pictures for all these things. I don't know how to draw a picture for faith. I don't know how to draw a picture for hope either, but I do know how to draw a picture for love. I can just draw a heart. Help. Sometimes you can draw like hands, right? Helping hands. There's another hand.
Putting a band-aid on somebody.
Yeah, that's another one. Yep.
For hope, maybe you can do like folded hands and someone looking up with big eyes.
Yeah, that'd be neat.
Or you could draw someone helping someone up a cliff.
Yeah. Helping him off a cliff. And he lived there a year and 6 months. How long was he there?
A year and a half.
That's a year and a half. How long was Paul in the city of Thessalonica? Remember that? He preached 3 Sabbath days. That means he was probably in the city of Thessalonica between 2 weeks and 3 weeks. That's less than a month. How long did he stay in Corinth?
A year and a half.
A year and a half.
That's a long work for Paul. Oh, what a blessing. This would be. And what do you think about people like Titus? The longer they hold on to Paul's foot, the longer they get to hold on to Paul's foot, how is their faith going to be?
Really good.
And their heart and their hope, right? Is that going to give more time for the guys next door to hear what Paul has to say?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Pretty cool. All right. But when there's a but. Here it comes, right? We knew it was going to happen. Good grief. But when Gallio was proconsul of Achaia, the Jews with one accord rose up against Paul. Here it comes. Rose up against Paul and brought him before the judgment seat, saying, all right, we can draw a judgment seat because that's fun. Basically, it's going to look like the throne, right? And I'm going to have a guy on it. I'm going to draw him angry because it's more fun when they're angry. He's got his hands there. And he's got a funny hat because he's a judge and they need funny hats. Right? there he is. And he's just like, there. He's sitting on his judgment seat. Okay. They brought him before the judgment seat, saying, this man is persuadeth men to worship God, contrary to the law. Okay, let's think about this. Has Paul been persuading people to worship God?
Yes.
Yes.
Has Paul been persuading people to worship God contrary to the law?
Depends on what the law is.
Good. That's it. That's it. Are there many laws in the world?
Yes.
So let's see what happens here.
Worship one.
Let's see what happens here. But when Paul was about to open his mouth, all right, this is a fun thing to draw. Paul, who loves preaching, doesn't get a chance to preach. All right, so here he is. I'm going to draw him with his mouth open like this. But then he goes, oops. And so here's his finger like, oh, I have something to say. But guess what happens before he can say it? Something happens. So here's Paul. He's about to open his mouth. But when Paul was about to open his mouth, Gallio said to the Jews, if indeed it were a matter of wrong or of wicked villainy, O you Jews, reason would that I should bear with you. But if they are questions about words and names of your own law, here's the key word, your own law, look to it yourselves. I'm not minded to be a judge of these matters. Now, why he moved from Alabama to Corinth to be proconsul, I don't know. And he drove them from the judgment seat. So I'm going to point, he's going to point away. So when Paul was about to defend himself, did Gallio let Paul defend himself?
He did it himself.
No.
Yeah, Paul was about, but he didn't get to speak. So now this is a very fun thing to do. We don't get to do this very often. You get to draw an X on Paul's mouth. Nope, Paul, you don't get to speak because Gallio's going to speak.
Guess what? We could put some blue and a bit of red on Gallia because he was being
Kind.
without knowing
Well,
it.
that's true. But let's see what he says. He's going to argue this. If it were a matter of wrong or wicked villainy, I would bear with you. Was Paul wrong? Was
No.
Paul a wicked villain? Was he stealing from the temples? Was he hijacking trucks on the highway that had DVD players? Was he bootlegging alcohol? Was he
No.
murdering the bad guy? No,
Opposite.
he wasn't doing any of those things, right? So Gallio is saying, if he was doing some wicked villainy, I would listen to you. But if they are questions about words and names of your own law, look to it yourselves. So what's he saying?
You do it all yourself. It's about words and things.
Yes. Have you ever, probably not, maybe you guys have no idea what this is like. Have you ever argued with a brother or sister
Yes. Yes.
about
Yes.
something that was really important? And then you brought it to a mom and a dad, and the mom and the dad say, none of this makes any sense. Just stop your arguing. Has that ever happened to you?
Kinda, yeah.
Maybe.
This is a small thing.
It's
It
just
doesn't matter. Stop
Gallio is saying, look, you don't like the words Paul is saying, but they're not against the law. So get out of here. Sometimes that's what I need to say as a dad, maybe. Hey, you kid, get out of here. He's saying, I don't want to hear your complaints. I don't want to hear your arguments. You figure it out. Do you think that's what they wanted to hear?
No. Paul wanted
Yeah.
for a death sentence.
They want, no, we want you to get Paul. You don't like me. So let's see what they do. Let's see what they do. If you think that's a silly reaction, wait till you see what they do. And he drove them from the judgment seat. And they all laid hands on Sosthenes, the ruler of the synagogue, and beat him before the judgment seat. They beat up their own guy, but Gallio cared for none of these things. Look, you guys are just arguing. I don't even want to hear it. So what did they do?
They beat him.
And they beat up their own guys. Now we get to draw a beating. All right.
Look, that's the only arm sticking out.
So you gotta draw a guy getting beat up. Draw a guy, and they also have to draw them punching. It's a good thing we didn't draw arms earlier, right? So here's a punch. Here's a punch.
They have such solemn faces.
A bunch of people fighting.
So there they are. They're punching.
Yeah, their faces are very solemn.
Oh yeah. So I gotta change their eyes, right?
Big angry eyes.
They're closing their eyes so they don't see him. That's how much they like him.
Give them some angry teeth and some angry eyebrows. Open mouths, right? And so, this is what they did. So in most of the towns, Paul got beat up, right? In this town, the judge wouldn't listen to these guys, and so who do they beat up?
Their own guy.
Their own guy. They don't beat up the judge. They beat up their own guy. They beat up their own leader. That's
Isn't
how
he the
messed
one
up they
who-
are.
Isn't the one their leader the one who believed, or did the one who started to believe Paul not become?
Okay, they did have a ruler of the synagogue, but he became a believer. So my guess is they got a new ruler of the synagogue, and when his idea to get Paul kicked out of town didn't work, they beat him up. So this is a pretty interesting thing that you need to think about. The world is going to fight. Have you seen people in the world do that? Sometimes just with words, sometimes literal punches. The world is going to fight. And when the world doesn't get what it wants, what does it do with the leader that didn't give them what they wanted?
Punches in.
They beat up that leader and they get a new one. All right. So what if they make this guy a leader? Okay. What if he can't give them what they want? What are they going to do to him?
Beat him up.
They'll end up beating up him. What about the second? And it just keeps going and going,
Beating up.
going.
Until there's no people left.
But the reality is there's still tons of people in the world, isn't there?
Yeah.
So that means they're not just going to keep beating up everybody until they're all gone. The world will keep choosing worldly things. So what should you do instead?
Beat them up gently. Just kidding.
Hold on to Paul. Hold on to Paul, even if you're just grabbing him by the foot. Hold on. And the point here is not just the man Paul, but hold on to the teachings of Paul. One of the big things that Paul preaches about and teaches in his letters, and you read it when you go through the epistles, is Christians need to get along. Christians need to not fight. Christians need to not beat up their own people. Christians need to not take people to court. Christians need to just settle, just calm down, just let things be, try to figure it out. We're not going to riot and do all the crazy stuff like the world. We're going to hold on to Paul's teaching, and we're going to try to calm down. Now, here's the thing. Have you ever been annoyed at somebody before?
Yes.
Yes, 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 yes,
Okay,
yes, yes,
Have you felt that way even today already?
Yes.
Yeah. So
Yes.
it's not like it's going to be easy.
No.
We're going to get riled up like the world, right? But if we just keep holding on to the teachings of Paul, we can calm down and we won't have to get ugly, try to get people to fight and try to get people to be angry with us. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm going to close the class there. That's basically where I was at, because in the rest of the chapter, and then a little bit into the next chapter, Paul's going to get into traveling again. So So I just wanted to talk about how Paul, when he was in Corinth, God helped him have a lot of peace. And even when the city tried to be full of anger and a mess and angst and fighting and turning on their own leaders that they thought would help them,
He didn't even have to talk to them.
God will give us the peace we need. You know what? I think there's a lot of adults who need to hear that message too. So everybody go home. You are at home. Go to another part of your home and tell your parents to read Acts chapter 18. It's a cool chapter. All right, do you have any questions about this right here? All right, I guess that's it. See you later, guys.